Hi everyone, Robert here. Today we're going to talk about queer tarots. But I thought before I talk about queer tarots, and some of these queer tarots I would like to disagree with and criticize, and I'd like to prefer some of them to others. So when I do that, I would like you to know who you're dealing with. So who am I? Bit of background. I am a, broadly speaking, queer person. I am married to a man. And on top of that, I've been an artist in my life. I've been a musician and writer. And over the years, it has really been my agenda, though sometimes it wasn't entirely conscious, to introduce queer elements into the mainstream, okay? So I'm not in opposition to the current movement, you could say, of queer or trans or non-binary. How could I be? I'm partly responsible for it. Okay, well, we're going to be looking at 5, broadly speaking, queer tarots or queer-ish or queer-tinged tarots today that have come out over the space of decades, most of the modern ones. Let's start first with this one. This one's by a guy who's half American, half Mexican. He goes under the name of Felix Deon. And as a tarotist, he has a slightly different name. He's taken a Mexican style name, and I'm not going to even attempt to pronounce it. That's his Mexican name. And that is the name of the tarot. But you can find him online with a more European style name, which is Felix Deon, which is probably a reference to the Chevalier Deon, who was a famous transsexual in France in the 17th century. This is an indie production. It's absolutely lavish, and I got it from my husband for Christmas one year, and I've been enjoying it ever since, as you do when you're a bad person. So it's not all that cheap, but you get a wonderful bag and you get a lovely, well-produced deck of cards and an extremely well-produced book here in 2 colours. It's black and white splashed with sort of blood red. And the book's pretty good. It's in Spanish and English, and it gives you a lot of information, and it really explains what this artist is doing. Look at how nicely typeset and produced that book is. Just gorgeous in every way. So I'm quite well disposed towards this tarot, even though I don't think I could read with it. I love Felix Deon's style of illustration, but there are a couple of reasons why, in the end, this isn't really a tarot for me. He has 4 minor arcana suits, which are translated into Mexican or native Mexican equivalents. So here they are, the 4 suits in this tarot deck. The 4 suits are hearts, flints, staffs and jades. So it is, in terms of the minor arcana, it is quite close to the Rider-Waite-Smith, and the tarotist Felix Deon is quite into the Rider-Waite-Smith. I've seen him on Instagram referring to it or telling fortunes with the RWS. He's lovingly translated this into terms which kind of meld with indigenous Mexican culture and religion. Here, for example, is an amazing 9 of Swords. There's a 7 of Swords. You know, mutatis mutandis. Here's his version of the 10 of Cups. His version of the 5 of Cups. And the court cards are very lovely too. Oh, there's an absolutely lovely Felix Deon there, 2 of Coins. And a gruesome sacrificial 10 of Swords. His court cards are very attractive. Look, there's a lovely page. a lovely knight. As you get into the kings and queens, and as you get into the major arcanas, the design begins to become rather dense. And I think, much though I admire this deck, that is why I probably wouldn't read with it, because there is so much going on in these images. Look, there's La Purificación, a lovely sun there, a lovely moon. But there's a star, and I'm beginning to find that a bit busy. A fantastic tower. A pretty good temperance, but then a death. It's great, but it's not what the Germans would call plakativ. It doesn't quite jump out at you because there's so much in it. Similarly there, Hanged Man, and I think there's a lovely fleshy queer sensibility to that. And the image of the Hanged Man is really nice, but it's lost in a lot of other stuff. A pretty nice wheel. You can probably see where I'm coming from here. It might be absolutely your cup of tea. I find there's a lover's card, and there's a high priest. I find the blending of European and indigenous Mexican spirituality not entirely easy to take on board. And if you really delve into his book, you do slightly come up against that. I think it feels like a slightly forced marriage, conceptually speaking. I think in terms of graphic design, in terms of illustration, it results in some very beautiful cards. So I cautiously recommend this deck if you want something very, very different. If you want a tarot deck that, your next door neighbor doesn't have, this is a pretty interesting one to have in your collection. Next up is a deck which, though I don't use it all the time, is in some ways my favorite deck in the world. And before you get too excited, I need to tell you that it's not terribly easy to get hold of. We live in hope that there will be a second edition of this deck. It is the wonderful Oculi Occultati tarot by Radomil Boguslawski, a young Polish designer. And I found this deck quite by chance in Watkins in London. It has a monochrome major arcana, which put me off it for a while. Gorgeous, gorgeous images. And then it has 4 suits. We have rather goldeny batons there. We have we have bluey cups, and the bluey cups people have got tails. So each suit has a sort of tribe of its own. It's very, very lovely. There's a lovely devil. Then we have the pentacles, and the pentacles have got, they're very hairy. They've got huge feet. They've got funny little ears. They're sort of earth spirits, aren't they? The pentacles. And there's three of the pentacles. It's very faithful to Rider-Waite-Smith. So I'm going to come back to this later. This idea of faith to Pamela. And there's the swords in a really gorgeous pink colour. And the swords are kind of, because I suppose they're intellectuals, it's mental energy, they're kind of a bit thinner. The minor arcana are almost all nude in this deck. The little fairies in the swords cards seem to have little wings, and they're rather thin and aesthetic people. They're they're not exactly in their bodies, are they? But the court cards are so gorgeous. So the court cards are all dressed. The minor arcana are all nude. It took me a while to twig what was going on in this deck. As you go through the major arcana, it starts off, like a bit queer. You've got a lesbian couple there for the lovers. And then it goes on, and he decides that no, he wants to draw men, and I mean, he's doing his own thing, isn't he? So just a second. So there's a gorgeous devil. That's no surprise, but we have here, I think, interesting and surprising. We have a male world card, and then. I mean, tarot decks take a long time to do, don't they? As far as I can see, he got into the minor arcanas and he thought, "Screw this! I'm just going to draw men." Now, I think what's interesting about this deck is that it sort of conveys what you might call queer desire or gay desire, but it's not in any way pornographic. It's not really arousing. It's just like it's the artist's feelings about the male body. And the other thing I like about this deck is that it restricts itself in a sense to two things. It's very faithful to tarot. It's dreamy. Oculi Occultati means eyes closed, and everyone in this deck except the devil has their eyes closed. Look at the King of Wands showing his abs there. So if you have this deck where every figure has their eyes closed, it has an interesting effect on you. It puts you into a certain very special mood. It's very magical. But as I say, the deck does two things. It puts you into a contemplative mood, and it kind of honors one's physicality as well. And this is actually very important to me as a spiritual gay man, that I need to be able to be gay and spiritual at the same time. So, you can get gay decks which are completely pornographic, where everyone's got a six-pack, and you can get really explicit ones where the genitals are showing and blah-de-blah-de-blah. But, we can go elsewhere for images of naked people if we want. But this kind of contains somehow a gay or a queer sexuality without that taking over. And what's more, it doesn't stray into politics. And this is going to be, in the course of this video, a theme for me. The question of, are we going to stray into politics or not? Is politics going to cast a shadow over our tarot reading? And is it going to get in the way of the project? What this guy has done is he has stuck very close to RWS imagery. So he's in the system, which I think is it's sensible, really, because I think tarot is a tool which is meant to be used. It's like an alphabet. I don't really think there's any point in reinventing the wheel every time one designs a new tarot deck. So I think this is an example of someone who absolutely puts their stamp on the tarot without reinventing it. So here we have the person with the hawk in the garden. Here we have the person who is oppressed by too much to carry. Here we have the person who is a bit entrenched. And, the bandage is there. All the images are there. Here we have the person who has scored a victory. The victory wreath is there. It's so magnificent that it's quite overwhelming. I think I've looked at a lot of tarot packs in my time, and I think this is probably one of the most talented artists I've seen working in tarot. It's just ravishing. Not only does he know about anatomy, he knows about anatomy so well that he can push it in his own different direction, and so he's beyond competent. He's extremely competent, and he knows about costume as well. So the court cards tend to be a kind of like a fashion show in which you get a series of divine costumes. The pages are just there with their symbols, but the kings and queens and knights, they have quite a lot of RWS references and astrological references, which frankly I think you need. I think so many tarot decks fall down on their court cards, which is another theme I'm going to come back to. So here we have Knight of Battens riding a lion there. You really have to look quite hard, but here we have the Knight of Pentacles, and there you can just see the eye of a bull. So he's either riding a bull or he's walking along beside a bull there. And here we have Knight of Cups riding an eagle. I think that's the eagle as the symbol of Scorpio, the water sign. And then weirdly, very weirdly, we have the Knight of Swords riding a dolphin. So that's the one really strange association, correspondence in this deck. If I ever get to interview the designer, I'm going to ask him what he's playing with, putting the Knight of Swords on a dolphin. But maybe he feels that dolphins are just very clever. Okay, so by the way, the Oculi Occultati tarot is from 2018. The Felix Deon is from 2021. And now coming right up into the present era, we have two tarots from 2022. And these are similar in a sense, in that they're both, you could say, hardcore queer tarots. Fodor Pavlov, this comes on US Game Systems, and this one's published by Hay House. They're both, I think, fairly mainstream productions. They both come with their books. I reviewed this one, the Fodor Pavlov. I've given it quite a long review. I gave it a 45-minute review because I found it quite provocative in a way, and I really needed to sort out my ideas about it. I kind of love it and hate it. I think there's some very good material in there. There are some very good images. There's also quite a lot of disappointing stuff where he strays from RWS and he tries to reinvent the wheel. I think, incidentally, this one is a bit smarter in a way. Both these books they read like political manifestos. This book reads a bit more intelligently than this book. But they're both banging on. I mean, they both have bees in their bonnet. Fyodor Pavlov is sort of just rather cross with the world, and he doesn't like the King of Swords, and he doesn't like the Ten of Swords, and he wishes this could be different, and he wishes that could be different, which casts a sort of shadow over the project. And this tarot is, to me, just a bit too much in that it suggests that challenging the gender duality is the way out of all our problems, and it is the absolute first step towards saving the world and sorting all your problems out, is just for there to be no more gender. So that's quite an extreme position, and also it makes for quite an obsessive project. You can agree with it or you can disagree with it, but that's the beast you're dealing with. I will put these political questions to one side for a minute and just talk about whether these decks function well as tarot decks, because I think in the end, that's what it's about. You can get your politics from somewhere else. When you want to read tarot, you want the deck that's right for you. So the Fyodor Pavlov tarot, and my advice is just skip the book unless you're a masochist. The Fyodor Pavlov tarot is rather lush and aesthetic and gorgeous in a way. I mean, in a sense, it signals gorgeousness without being 100% gorgeous, to be brutal about it. It's gilt edged, but that's really as good as it gets. In the end, what's left is the designs. Okay, so the major arcana cards are where the most energy and attention has gone in this deck, and some of them are very nice. I'm a big fan of that High Priestess. I think it's gorgeous. I'm a big fan of that Death card, also very, very strong. I think that's a terrible Hermit card. A nice Hanged Person, a fantastic Tower. So Emperor and Chariot, a political lover's card, an unusable devil's card unless you're reading for someone who goes to the Kit Kat Club. And again, a rather sexualized Wheel of Fortune. A few that I don't like, and then a few more that I do. I think that's a very bad judgment card. I think it conveys the meaning of the death card rather than the judgment card. And then we have this interesting phenomenon of, the modern woke tarot shows the world card as an Earth Mother. We get exactly the same thing in this deck, which is a sort of a modern heresy, if you like, because the world card is not Gaia, in my humble opinion. I think that's quite a nice image, but as I said in my review, my long review of this deck, this would have been really the point in the deck to introduce a hermaphrodite image, because there is some evidence that the world card was a hermaphrodite image in the old days, and as such was an image of completion. But no, we don't get that. We just get a sort of a Gaia image. The minor arcana are a mixed bag. We have swords. Everything's on monochrome on a cream background, which may or may not be your cup of tea. We have swords have a second colour that's red. Pentacles' second colour is gold. Cups' second colour is blue. And batons' second colour is green. On the whole, it's quite close to RWS. It doesn't reinvent the wheel too much. That's a great card. But it kind of, I think, runs out of energy as it gets into the court cards. There's a lot of invention and energy in some of the cards. I think that's fantastic. The aces are nice. There's nice different cultural influences coming in. That's a lovely Fool. That's a lovely Temperance. There's an uncertainty as to whether this deck is office friendly or not. Most of it's like aesthetic stuff, and then you get a card which is completely not office friendly. I won't show you the whole thing because I have already done so in my longer review. They're nice aces, aren't they? But I would just like to say before I finish with this that I think it falls down on the court cards. And I think the court cards are the test of tarot design because they're very difficult to research, they're difficult to read, they're difficult to make head or tail of. Everyone says different things. I mean, even the lovely Mary K. Greer, her book, The Tarot Court, which you would hope is going to be the be-all and end-all and it's going to sort everything out. It doesn't sort everything out. It just adds to the confusion. And I think these court cards go nowhere fast. I think they show a lack of research. The people are there, doing various things. He's representing disabled people. We have representing pregnant people, but there isn't a feeling that the imagery and the the correspondences, astrological or Kabbalistic or whatever, have really been digested and understood. I mean, when a tarotist designs a major arcana card, it's clear that it's got to work for you. It's got to be itself. It's got to be justice. You've got to have some sort of image of justice, haven't you? World is going to be some sort of image of completion. Strength, there's usually going to be a wild beast in it, and the wheel's going to have a wheel, and so on and so forth. But if you look at many modern selections of court cards, there isn't really a meaning in the card. There's just a person. And I don't think that's really what the consumer should be looking for when they buy a tarot deck. I think you want court cards that are going to help you to read, that are going to express a mood, that are going to come in with astrological correspondences, that are going to tell a story. Otherwise, you're really stuck. And some of these court cards are really bad. There's a Queen of Batons who is... every tradition agrees that the Queen of Batons is a highly sexual, free woman. And here we see her wrapped up in some strange corset with a with some strange thing round her head, looking thoroughly grumpy and thoroughly repressed. So, as I say, I don't think this set of court cards in the Fyodor Pavlov tarot belongs to any very well researched or coherent tarot tradition. And I'm not surprised, because there are very few people writing about court cards that make them helpful or coherent. There isn't an ultimate truth about court cards. There isn't an ultimate truth about any tarot cards, but there are ways that you can go to make court cards really hard-working cards in your divination practice. You can read Paul Hewson, you can read Yolanda Robinson, you can have a quick look at some of Robert Place's work if you want. So, the Fyodor Pavlov tarot, I don't think it's a winner. I think, if you like the Aubrey Beardsley style, and there's a lot of queer characters in this deck, and if that puts you into a good, comfortable state for reading tarot cards, then go for it. The deck's quite expensive. The deck is, frankly, I think, overpriced. You're paying for this hardback, rather cheaply produced hardback book, and the gold edging, and so you're then asked to pay sort of £50 or dollars or euros for this deck, and I don't think it's worth it. Tarot cards shouldn't cost £50 or euros or dollars. They should cost half of that. So while we're on the subject, let's have a quick look at this one. And I think this is worse than the Fyodor Pavlov tarot in some ways, in most ways. On the plus side, I think the drawing style is extremely charming. The backs are nice, and actually the Fyodor Pavlov cardstock is not particularly nice. It's a kind of rather cheesy fake canvas effect, and these ones are on a lovely cardstock. As you can see, they're really thick, aren't they? That's a big thick deck there. They come in a nice box, and the little white book isn't too pompously produced. It's the same size as the card, so in terms of presentation, it's very nice. What I would say about this deck is that the major arcana are the best ones. Here we have, another appearance of the heavy world lady, which has become sort of currency. I'll flip through these because I think they're nice. The author says that they are against the need to be glamorous or beautiful or fit, or to know which gender you belong to. And I think that's great. I think that's remarkably... I think that's a weird lover's card, because it seems to be about someone who's falling in love with themselves, which in a deck which is so much about being, to put it politely, very concerned with your identity. I think that's rather remarkable to see that image there, for all to see. These are nice images, and they do kind of work. They do function, and I think you could read with them. I think the colours are nice, and I think the drawing's nice. The author says that they are not an artist, and sort of fell into this tarot design thing almost by accident. But if that's the truth, then hats off, because the draftsmanship is nice, and it's very stylish. It's the kind of style which I like. So that's 22 cards that I quite like, but I don't really like the rest. I like the look of them, but as you can see, we've strayed into the territory of reinventing the Rider-Waite-Smith. The 2 of Wands is a candle and a matchstick. The 3 of Wands is 3 balloons going up into space. The 4 of Wands, with those 2, you can just about see how they work. The 4 of Wands is, a kettle on the stove and 4 oil lamps. And yeah, we're definitely, it's not an easy stretch, is it? 5 of wands, some conflict in there, I suppose. 6, we do see a wreath. 7, I guess we see some sort of a challenge there. 8, we see something fast is about to happen. 9 of wands, I don't see the connection. 10 of wands, and so it goes. And the court cards. Okay, so I'm going to catch my breath and try and tell you what I think about these court cards. I think in a way they're both better and worse than the court cards in the Fyodor Pavlov tarot. And this all comes with the proviso that I don't think most contemporary tarot decks have very good court cards anyway. Fyodor Pavlov is more of a traditionalist in some ways, because he hasn't given up on his kings, although he might change a couple of genders. He hasn't given up on his knights. He hasn't given up on people actually, dressed like they come from the moment in history when people actually did have swords and things like that. Fyodor Pavlov is interested in decorative art. He's interested in iconic art. And I give the devil his due. It's effective in a decorative sense. The Fifth Spirit Tarot, I think, is much more in the contemporary world. Let me show you these court cards in no particular order. It's very much in the contemporary world, and it's very much about sort of dressing to make a statement. And the whole deck philosophically occupies this space of queerness. And queerness seen as this experience of being an outsider, of being oppressed by ideas of normality that are being imposed on you by other people. So, or by a system over which you have limited control, and you are in this kind of, you're one of the oppressed millions, aren't you? And so queerness has become akin to being a person of colour or being a person who lives in the Southern Hemisphere. It's clearly not only about your gender identification or even your sexual orientation. So here in these cards, we're seeing not so much a fashion show as a sort of a demographic show, as you can see. So we've got all sorts of people belonging to different demographics, different ages, different religions, different kind of gender identification, some able-bodied, some not, different skin colours and so forth. Now, I don't recommend this tarot, not because I've got anything against diversity and all that sort of stuff, but because I think there are better ways of doing tarot. These court cards are, talked about in this book. And as I say, the book is smarter than Fyodor Pavlov's book. Fyodor Pavlov, I think, is very under the influence of Rachel Pollack as a writer. And as you might know, Rachel Pollack has a very strange attitude towards the court cards, in which she disapproves of certain archetypes. She disapproves of most of the kings. She disapproves of most of the knights. She is so bored by the pages, she doesn't really say anything. And she's always going off on strange rabbit holes. And I think Fyodor Pavlov is sort of imitating that. And there are some extraordinary rants about some of the cards, like he rants about the King of Swords being cisgender, which is clearly a problem of his own creation. This is much more contained, much more coherent, and it sort of follows a particular way of understanding court cards. And I'll carry on showing them to you as I rant, which is that the court cards, can be understood by, there are 4 suits. Each suit applies to a particular kind of energy, and then there are 4 ranks, and each of those ranks applies to a sort of a time of life or a position in society. Now, that is, of course, absolutely true, but it's not the whole story. And I think if you try to explain the court cards just purely in those terms of suit and rank, things get a bit boring and things get a bit heady. My personal view is that court cards are more interesting when you go back to pre-Golden Dawn times and you find out which characters from myth and history they were connected to. I've talked about this in my review of the Fyodor Pavlov deck, and it's just a little bit less schematized, and it's just a little bit more inspiring. I find the way these court cards are drawn is very nice, and there is coherence to the system. Some of them stray quite a long way from tarot tradition. Like I think that one King of Cups doesn't really have a lot of King of Cups energy in it at all. Knight of Wands, not bad. King of Swords, a bit controversial, not because it seems to be a woman, but because I don't think the King of Swords is an activist. Queen of Cups, not bad, and so on and so forth. And when you read the book, it is coherent in this system, but it's a bit bland. And I think generally people around the world are slightly giving up on court cards. I even saw that Hermit's Cave hosted a live stream in which he proposed as a topic of discussion, shall we just abolish the court cards? I think that would be a big pity, but I can understand why people are talking about abolishing court cards, because the way court cards are done these days is just, it's very dull, it's very theoretical, and no matter how much you try to schematize them, it never really seems to take off. In a word, they are not clear archetypes in the way that the major arcana are clear archetypes, and they're not clear doing cards in a way that the minor arcana are clear doing cards. So there you go. Fifth Spirit Tarot by Charlie Claire Burgess. And there's the author there. And just in case you're wondering, the book looks quite cute, and it includes some spreads, and one of the spreads is a spread to help you work out what your gender is. So the book is clearly quite complete in itself. Okay, so by way of a sweetener, in case you're really despairing of ever finding a gay or even gay-ish tarot that you like, here's my advice. Just get yourself a copy of the Morgan Greer. This is an original I got on eBay, but there's nice reprints. You can get Morgan Greer in a tin, which is very nicely reprinted. And, you know, these are nice cards. It's from about 1980, I think, and you know it's a pretty deck. And what I want to say is that there is a kind of like a gay-ish thing happening, which just might make you feel at home. If you need that just buzzing in the background, you've got to focus on, I think, a certain kind of masculinity. I've pulled out some of the more obvious culprits for you here. There you've got a hairy-assed guy in the Lover's card, and quite a lot of moustache action. And if you think I'm hallucinating, if you think I'm just being silly here, take a look at this Fool card. Take a look at the Fool's bundle, and you tell me what that looks like. There. So I think there's a lurking sort of gay joke happening in the Morgan Greer. And as I say, if you're despairing of finding the right queer tarot, dry your tears and nip out and get this. You can get it in a tin, a slightly smaller version, or you can probably get a full-size repro version from US Game Systems. You'll be fine. It'll see you through. That's all from me. You have been watching Robert Farrar's Tea and Tarot, and I will be back next week with more of this stuff. Bye.